Hi there, and welcome to the webinar, Accounts Payable Recovery Audit Scope Expansion for Higher ROI by PRGX. So before we begin today, I'd like to cover off some housekeeping items. If you've got any questions throughout the webinar, or if you're having trouble hearing us, please submit these using the question box. And be sure to follow us on our social channels, LinkedIn and Twitter, by searching PRGX Global. I will get started in just a few minutes. So today we're pleased to have Angie Holston and Danielle Adamson join us in an open discussion as they share their insight on expanding recovery audit scope. So Angie Holston is the Senior Director of Client Relationships for PRGX. She's a CPA by trade, spent the first third of her career in public accounting, has been a controller and VP finance, and has spent the last 20 years in consulting around procurement, accounting and finance. She specializes in transformation, best practices, and improving efficiency with business process improvement. Danielle Adamson is also the Director of Client Relationships for PRGX. She began her recovery audit career with PRGX in 2005 and has worked with dozens of the world's largest companies throughout her tenure. Both Angie and Danielle work with our non-retail client base in their roles at PRGX and work with our current customers to better understand their goals and challenges in procure to pay. Their support and consultation with P2P leaders helps develop recovery audit programs to help companies maximize value and close gaps in their P2P cycle. So thank you to both Angie and Danielle for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That leads us in today's content. Our businesses will continue to look for ways to increase cash flow and improve ROI in order to maximize working capital going into 2021. An often overlooked way to do this is through the evolution and expansion of current or long-standing accounts payable recovery audits. There's an opportunity to return money back to the bottom line once the audit scope potential is reviewed and plans are implemented to guide project expansion. Today's webinar will explore the opportunity of identifying new claim types and expanding audit operation areas to areas such as contract compliance and telecom audits. Attendees will also learn how company data can be used to research and identify new opportunity areas to support the project expansion. So Danielle and Angie, before we get started, we thought it might be a good idea to review what we mean by AP recovery audit and the typical benefits it provides. And as someone who is talking to various companies' AP departments, can you please share a few thoughts and reflections?
Yeah, sure. I can get started with that. So basically within the AP, errors will occur, just a normal course of business. Even very highly automated with organizations with extensive controls will have some misses, will have some gaps, which is where we come in. We take in the data and analyze the data looking and transactions looking to identify and recover any lost funds. Typically, it's what we're finding is about 0.1% of your spend.
Yeah, and I would add to that in addition to the funds that we recover, we also identify areas of risk kind of within your process that your company can use to improve. So as we go through and we find those errors that Danielle talked about, we capture the root cause reasons into our reporting so that you can identify system gaps and process gaps that can be closed. So in addition to finding and recovering funds, we also prevent future errors as well.
Great, thank you for the quick recap, ladies. So let's get into expansion opportunity. Once a company has implemented a recovery audit, what are some of the ways that the audit scope can increase to bring even more value back to the company?
Yeah, I think it's important to look at your organization, the footprint of your organization. So all of the divisions, all of the different areas within the organization that could have spend that we can be auditing. Is your audit a global audit? Do you have spend in different countries that we can take into consideration and perform the audit risk? Disparate groups or systems, or sometimes we'll see clients set aside some high profile suppliers, but they really should be audited as well. We just may treat those as sensitive suppliers.
Right, and one thing I would add, Danielle, to that is maybe taking a look at the timing of your audit cycle, right? So a lot of times when people start, they'll audit 1 year behind to their transaction date. We would actually recommend that you pull that audit forward to 90 days behind your transactions, because accelerating that audit closer to your transaction date actually gives you a better chance for recovery. Because if you wait a full year to begin the audit, sometimes those credits disappear, they get applied to other things or written off, or they're harder to research and support and clean up, right? So the other thing is when you wait that long, in addition, the feedback on your process is also delayed. So the longer you're unaware of a process gap, the longer that gap is open and the more leakage that occurs. So the optimum time to do your audit is 90 days behind transactions.
Great tips, definitely helpful, thank you. So I know we often have our clients expand to different versions of audits once they're underway. Are you able to share a little bit more about other types of extension?
I could start. One area that I would suggest that you pull into scope would be any third-party payment application that you're using, assuming it has enough transaction volume. For example, there's P-cards or a temp labor tool or a freight application. A lot of these systems feed directly into your ERP, thus kind of going around your duplicate payment review process. So by pulling that data in, we can compare it in our audit process to make sure you haven't paid that supplier from two different payment sources. So that's one way.
Yeah, I would add in rebates. Rebates are just complicated to begin with, both from the supplier standpoint and from our customer standpoint. So making sure that you are tracking your rebates and that you're actually getting the rebates and you're redoing the math, right? Once you get it, to make sure that you're actually getting the entire rebate that you negotiated in the first place is another good area to hit.
Clients, a lot of clients I have definitely have issues in the rebate area. Another area I would suggest is pricing. It's a good spot for review, especially in an area with frequent price changes. We can compare that price change information against the invoices to ensure that those changes were enacted properly. So it's a data trace to make sure that those items are happening in a timely manner when they're supposed to happen. And we can find a lot of funds that way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another good area is returns, right? I know I'm not sure, on the retail side of the house, but I do know that in the commercial side, returns is a big area for finding gaps, and just digging in deep into that process allows us to find to highlight some recoveries as well. Another one is a shipment, and that's kind of an audit that is not normally looked at, but so for those of you who don't know what a shipment is that a shipment is when a company has to turn over money to the state on a check that hasn't been cashed. And then the state holds those funds for the organization or the supplier or the individual to then claim. So what we do is we get in before the actual shipment or the turning over of the funds to the state happens. And by doing that, sometimes those checks haven't been cashed because they're a duplicate payment, or they're erroneous payment, or we're able to find the supplier and deliver the payment. So some of those things, and then that way you just what you're sheeting to the state is less.
Yeah, and I think that is a lot of the nooks and crannies that we need to look into to find some of those audit areas, right? And some of those get missed the first time through when we come up with a scope, but those are a lot of great areas for expansion. Once we've considered all of those, a company should probably think about moving on to doing a contract compliance audit. That's the next logical step. Sometimes it's referred to as a supplier audit. So this is when you review the supplier relationship and the transactions kind of against the contractual terms. And there's kind of two different levels of that kind of audit to consider. The first one is what we refer to at PRGX as a level 2 contract compliance audit. So that is when we start recalculating charges using your company's data to ensure that you are charged correctly. So allowances, pricing, rebates, things along those lines, right? So if you know you have rebates with suppliers, this isn't necessarily just missing a rebate like the AP audit would find. This is going back and kind of recalculating it, or doing a more proactive pricing review on a particular supplier. We also have what we call a level 3 audit, and this is where we dig a little deeper into the supplier relationship to ensure that all the benefit that your procurement department negotiated was actually received. So this type of audit leverages both your data and the supplier data to make those determinations. So some of the things that get reviewed are labor rates or any type of cost plus item in your relationship, or markups, multipliers, pass-throughs, overhead charges, right? So wherever there's kind of a more complicated than a PO with a price, this is a good spot to be able to go through and kind of dig through the relationship and make sure you're receiving all the value that you've negotiated.
I think that's a good point. The more complicated the negotiation is, the more we're typically going to find, just because there's so many moving parts and pieces to be reviewed. One other thought that I had was our specialty audits. So PRGX has partnered with some organizations to do specialty audits, like Telecom is a big one that we've invited or introduced to a lot of our customers, just to take a look at that telecom spend and, again, make sure that you're getting what you negotiated, and is it the best negotiation possible?
List of potential ways of additional value could be added to an already existing AP recovery audit. So that brings us to a close now, and I've actually had 2 audience questions that have come in today. So you mentioned shipment audits. Can you explain what data you would need for them?
So we actually have 90% of the data that we would need. The only additional data we would need is a list of the checks that are being sheeted. One additional item that can also help us dig a little bit deeper is to actually get bank statements. And that allows us to take not only the checks that you've listed off that are being sheeted, but also we have the data for the other checks that have been posted. And so that just allows us to do a match and make sure that everything is being sheeted, and everything that is being sheeted should be sheeted.
Great, thank you. And you mentioned supplier audits, but those are outside AP control and in procurement. How does that work?
You're right. So contract audits are generally owned and spearheaded by procurement. And often that procurement introduction comes from our AP contact that we've worked with, because you guys are familiar with our company and trust the value that we provide. So the audit itself does include a detailed review of the payment history as well. So both AP and procurement activity are covered in that audit, but it's definitely something that generally falls under the purview of procurement.
Okay. And actually, for the our third and final question, how many years does it take for an AP audit to fix the AP process gaps? And what's the normal life cycle for the process around this?
Well, I can take that one. So actually, a company should always be leveraging an AP audit. An AP audit is, the AP process is always subject to risk. There's staff turnover, system changes, software updates. At any given point in time, there's some sort of automated upload for some payment cycle that's happening, right? So any one of these changes over time can create a gap. An AP recovery audit is a best practice backup control to mitigate that. The amount of effort is very small from our client's perspective, and the value and security that we help provide are great. So it's something that should be always done as a best practice, following behind your AP process, for sure.
I would completely agree. Yeah, it's definitely something that you don't, as an organization, want to leave yourself exposed. I think it's to Angie's point, it's the best practice.
Great. Well, that brings us to a close of today's webinar. So I just want to thank you all for attending our conversation today, and a big thank you to our panelists, both Angie Holston and Danielle Adamson. This recording will be added to the PRGX website, along with our other on-demand webinars. And topics for those include things around recovery audit, root cause analysis, contract audit programs, source-to-pay acceleration, and spend analytics. So if you'd like to know more about today's conversation or recovery audit, or speak with a PRGX expert, please head to our website at prgx.com. And so we thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.